The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today. Welcome to the journey. My name is Kevin Polke, and I am the host of the journey. And today we have a special guest, Abbie Honaker. Is someone that I just met. Man, it was a cold day that we met when we were at the Rockford Leadership Women's Leadership Conference. And well, thank you very much for afterwards coming up and introducing yourself. And I'm glad to have you on the journey.
Much for having me, Kevin. I'm so glad you gave that speech as well. It was very inspiring, and I was excited to introduce myself to you so that we could continue the conversation.
Well, nice. So, Abby, when you have an opportunity to have fun, what do you do for fun?
Go outside. I'm a huge hiker. Used to be a trail runner, not so much trail running anymore. I have a 2-year-old now, so he slows me down a little bit, but he's running himself in the trails pretty good now. So I shouldn't say that. But we get outside in nature, the smells, the sounds, just kind of adjusts your nervous system or my nervous system, and I feel so much better. So every day try to get outside.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that with having the good fortune of having all four seasons here in Rockford, that
Uh-huh.
we have to push through some of those tendencies. Just go, oh, it's too hot or it's too humid or it's too cold. But if we dress accordingly, it's actually that's part of the experience.
You got it. And I used to do a lot of workout in thunderstorm. It's kind of a bummer, but they don't get thunderstorms out there and people miss hearing thunderstorms. So, this past weekend when it rained, I just kind of was grateful that I could hear the thunder, teach my 2-year-old about thunder and lightning and just kind of enjoy the storm.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
And your son's name, what's your son's name?
Jack.
Jack. Okay. Very nice. And was he named after somebody, or was you just like the name?
No, we just love the name. There's some great characters out there. It's a good strong name that's been around for a long time. So we just love the name.
Nice. Okay. Good. So Abby, are you from the Rockford area, or what landed you here in Rockford?
I'm not from the Rockford area, but I've lived here several times, if you can believe that. So I went to grade school here, went to middle school, moved away in high school, and then came back
Okay.
and started a career in different and then came back again. I love the people here. So I just keep coming back. I think this is my third or fourth time back in the area. I've got all the zip codes.
Yeah. Very nice. So where did you go to high school then?
So I went to high school in Memphis, Tennessee, Houston High School actually, and moved back for my senior year. So I came back and graduated from Hononegah, but only had a senior year here. So when people say, "Oh, did you graduate in this year? You must know all these names," and I didn't know anybody except for the people that were in either my middle school or who were in my senior year class. But loved it. It was kind of up to me at that point. My parents sat me down and said, "Hey, this is your senior year. It's up to you. We don't want to pull you out, but if you want to go back, we can." And I said, "Heck yes, let's do it."
Okay. Okay. And then so when you were in school in Memphis or even at High, were you involved with any extra activities, either theater or drama or sports? What were you involved with?
Definitely not theater or drama, but
Okay.
I was more of an athletic girl. So I played volleyball, I did cheerleading, I had some business opportunities. We did some extracurricular things. There was a newspaper editor in my high school. So, those kind of things.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And then after high school, what'd you do after high school?
Yeah, got a job right away in St. Louis and worked for Newell Rubbermaid and started, driving around. It was the coolest job. Got to drive around. They gave me a car and I got to drive around to all the Home Depots in the area and had big territory. I got to drive, overnight and I would do demonstrations for product. So I'd make sure product was on the shelf. I'd climb the tall ladders and downstock everything, make sure that product was sellable, and just increase the sales of all of my stores. So it was a really great experience, particularly for a kid right out of college.
Yeah, no kidding. And where'd you go to college?
Eastern Illinois University, so
Oh,
Central Illinois area.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, I know when we met, back in, I believe it was January, correct?
January.
Yeah, when we met in January, you had introduced yourself because you've gotten into wellness and health and wellness. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what inspired that, and what you are, yeah, what motivated you toward the health and wellness.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny looking back, mothers are very often wiser than we give them credit for. So I remember back in high school, my mom said, you maybe should consider being a nutritionist. And I thought, I don't want to work in a hospital. That's the last place I want to spend time in is a hospital. I want to avoid the hospital as much as I can. And she was right about something. So, I did what any teenager and, college kid is going to do. They're going to do their own thing. And I had a great career in business. But I found myself, climbing the corporate ladder, kind of burning the candle at both ends, which can work for a little while. I was doing really well, getting promoted, traveling all over the country, eating at the greatest restaurants, wining and dining clients. I had a great experience, and a great career. But I started seeing these little red flags in my health, despite what I thought was healthy, right? I would CrossFit, I was running, I was doing all the things, eating healthy, but then, I'd see these little red flags. Like, for example, I had atrial fibrillation and I went to the doctor and they said, well, just take this pill for the rest of your life. I thought, gosh, there has to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And I asked the doctor about diet and I could just see it in his eyes. Like he knew that there was a solution there, but he wasn't trained to tell me what that solution was. So I kind of just tucked that in the back of my mind, and blood pressure started to rise. I had to kind of keep an eye on that, and other things that were, my doctors called them pink flags. There was nothing huge, I wasn't diagnosed with anything, but these little things started creeping up, and I was in my mid 30s, and I just thought that there had to be a better way. So I tried all the things. I, paid thousands of dollars for a nutritionist. I changed my eating habits. I became vegan for a couple of years. I did everything, and turns out it was none of those things. And that's when I finally found functional health testing, which I feel like is a huge game changer. It was a huge game changer for me and a lot of my clients now, is just learning and understanding my particular body. And then with technology, the way that it is today, it's just accessible to everybody. So that's when I just dove head first and I said, you know what? People need this help. There's a big gap between what you know and what your doctors know, and chronic lifestyle diseases are just taking over the country. Doctors just don't have time for that. They don't have time to educate and guide people. So people are looking for solutions. And I try to feel like I help to, fill that void in between you and your doctor. How do we reverse some of those things before they become bigger issues in your health?
And so, just for our audience that may not be aware of, when you refer to functional health medicine or that perspective, maybe go a little bit more into detail about what exactly does that mean?
Yeah,
What's different about
absolutely.
a functional health physician or practitioner versus a general practitioner?
Absolutely. So, a general practitioner tends to fix the symptoms. So, for instance, if there's high blood pressure, they'll give you a pill for high blood pressure, and that will, bring your blood pressure down to normal. Thyroid medication is another great example. If your thyroid is off, they'll correct the levels so that they're back in balance. A functional practitioner really looks to what that root cause is, what's driving the thyroid to have abnormal results, what's causing the blood pressure to be elevated in the first place. So I feel like we go a level deeper. It's a little bit harder work, right? It's not as easy as taking a pill. And you and I work in much the same vein in terms of a holistic way to approach health. It's not just simply taking a pill. There's a lot of different fixes that all come together to really, regulate a nervous system and fix your digestive system and balance your gut microbiome. It takes little bits and pieces. I like to say it's just 1% a day for people. If they can just make small changes every day over time, consistency is what's going to win the game. It's not a race.
Well, and I think, that is, unfortunately, right? That is, um, I first was introduced to functional medicine, um, probably 10 plus years ago. There was a physician here in Rockford, Dr. Stephen Nitz,
Yes.
that I became friends with, and he was initially working in immediate care and emergency rooms, but he had this passion for functional medicine, and that
Mhm.
that was really the introduction. Now that I think of it, that was probably closer to 15 years ago when I originally opened up Four Corners
Mhm.
Wellness Center, and it was a physical location where we had chiropractic care along with reflexology, nutritionist, massage, and counseling, of course. And then we also had exercise therapy, and then I spent some time with Dr. Nitz, and I think to your point, I think that is one of the opportunities, but then also one of the challenges, because many people, by the time they become an adult, are accustomed to treating symptoms
Mhm.
versus really doing a root cause analysis about what is maybe really driving those symptoms. What is the problem? What's the imbalance?
Absolutely.
S-
Yeah, it's tough.
So when Abby, when you think of someone that's coming to see you and
Mhm.
is inquiring and they're struggling because it seems to be that their medical team is more chasing symptoms than alleviating uh, problems. What are some things that you can share that you found that have given hope as well as encouragement? Because it is going to take more effort, because it's going to turn into like more of a lifestyle, more so than just an exercise or, like you said, taking a medication.
You got it. So for me, it was a lot of the data. So learning about myself, and really validating that, oh, there's some work I can do on my liver. There's some work I can do here. So understanding functional ranges of testing and really understanding where do my hormones lie at this stage in my life. Understanding what does my gut look like. So data is the first piece of it. I think education is the second piece of it. So I spend an awful lot of time with my clients educating them on the why, right? You have to understand why you're doing. Don't just simply take a supplement because you saw it on TV. You really want to understand why you're taking that supplement and is it the right supplement for you. I think probiotics is a great one. People hear it and they say, "Oh, I should be taking probiotics," but probiotics aren't great for everybody. So if you test your gut, you understand, do you have a need for probiotics or do you have an overgrowth of bacteria and that could exacerbate a problem? And then I think the last piece of it is kind of accountability coaching. And that's where, a practitioner like myself, or even I know people in your world as well, really work with people because it is lifestyle changes. And it's small changes over time. So it's learning how to build habits, and good habits to replace the bad habits that maybe we've been accustomed to for decades. So I think those are the three key pieces that I rely on for success with my clients.
Yeah. And I I think all three of those, is a key to it, right? We
Mhm,
talk about this idea that the more that I'm aware
mhm.
of something, the more that I can get behind whatever the intervention is or the effort to change the data, right? And I think the key, especially when you talked about the third piece, because you can give someone a report that will then the report would then maybe lead them to what is causing the problem, the why, as you pointed out. But if I don't have someone translating it for me, or if I don't have someone coaching me in between sessions, or in between appointments, when I have those questions or when it gets tougher, I think that's really where that third component of, like you said, the accountability coach, or the one that helps someone in the gap.
Right. Absolutely, because it's going to get hard. Your motivation is really high in the beginning, and you're like, okay, I'm going to fix this. And then after a month or two, you're like, okay, this is getting hard. This is getting really hard. I have to think about this more than I want. Or, I just want to have a brownie. It's just one. And you just have to think about, okay, this doesn't mean no brownies for the rest of your life, but it means how can I indulge in a treat every now and again? Maybe I can make those brownies healthier. Maybe I don't really need the brownies. And what is the brownie going to do for me? Is it going to move me in that right direction, or is it going to move me off path? And am I willing to do that? Because everything is a decision. So it's just having that cheerleader kind of in your back corner saying, remember why you wanted to get healthy in the first place. Remember why you wanted to ditch all those medications, and remember why you didn't want to end up like somebody else in your family with some of these chronic diseases. So just all of those techniques, just having someone in your corner is super helpful.
It reminds me when you were talking, Abby, when I when I was even a teenager or a young adult, when I first back in the 80s got first introduced to, back in that time period, if you were going to hire someone to help you lift weights, then
Mhm.
most likely it was going to be someone who was competing as a bodybuilder, right? And
Right.
so it appeared that we knew what we were talking about because we had, made some changes in our own bodies. Well, sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. A lot of times we taught what we knew, and and others of us, we might have gone in a little bit deeper, look at to customize workouts and individualize workouts for our clients because they were had different desires, different goals that they wanted to attain. But I remember, with almost all my clients, after about 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, they knew how to do the exercises,
Mhm.
but they still wanted to make appointments, and they
Yes.
were still willing to pay money to meet. And I realized that this had a lot more to do with motivation, a lot more to do with accountability than it had to do with what I knew about a particular movement or how I could change an exercise program around or a nutritional program around. And that really was, later a segue into becoming a therapist because um, transformation that we talk about in therapy is not about, yes, it is being aware of symptoms, but it's really about not just having your symptoms alleviate. It's really about being a different person, being that person that you, as you pointed out, that you aspire to be and that you were created to be. And I think that is that difference between maybe traditional medicine and something that functional medicine and functional health can bring to the table.
I love that. The mind body connection is so strong, and doing mindset work is critically important even to heal your physical self. And I think I didn't recognize that long ago. I was doing all the physical things, but I didn't recognize that I had to slow down and I had to be mindful about certain things in order to heal my physical body. And so once I learned that about that connection, it was a game changer. So I think you're absolutely right there.
So Abby, maybe just for because again, many times people associate, uh, counselors with this particular agency, or I work with a chiropractor at this place, or whatever it may be. So Abby, tell us a little bit about how would if someone wanted to know more about what you do and your services, how would they get a hold of you? Yeah, how would that work? How kind of
Yeah.
lay out how that actually works?
Yeah, best place is my website. It's Take Charge Holistic Health, and I did that for a very specific reason. I think you pointed it out very early on. It's taking charge of your health, right? So Take Charge Holistic Health is the name of the site. I do ask a lot of questions up front to make sure that I'm a good fit with my clients and my clients are a good fit with me, because it does require effort, and investment in time, and so that's really critically important. Number one is to make sure that we're a good fit to work together. From there, I generally put together some functional medicine screenings, and I have a couple of go-tos that I love, that I learn a lot about a person from. And typically we do stool testing, so we test the gut microbiome. From there, we can get a really good look at how the person is digesting their food, what the immune system looks like, the liver, the pancreas, and also the microbiome. How healthy is that microbiome, and is there an overgrowth of bacteria, or maybe there's not enough bacteria? So I tend to do gut testing on majority of my clients. If it's appropriate, we do hormone testing. And what's critical about hormone testing is not just a blood sample that will test, the current levels, but also how is your body excreting, particularly estrogen? Because as estrogen can get bound up in the system if your liver is not functioning properly, and it can create all kinds of havoc on bodies. So making sure both men and women are excreting estrogen appropriately is critically important. I do food sensitivity testing. I do hair tissue mineral testing. So that just talks about, how is your body balanced in terms of minerals. And then I love a good blood chemistry or a full thyroid panel for a lot of people too. So depending on the symptoms, we put together a custom panel, and everything is mostly done within the convenience of your own home. There's a couple of blood tests where you'll need somebody to pull blood. And then we analyze those results and I put together a custom protocol for you. And then we determine how long we work together in order to achieve those health goals. So, and to your point, not everybody's health goals are the same. Some people it's about longevity and about living life to the fullest and being able to pick up their grandkids and feel strong. For some people, it is about weight loss. Some people it's about inflammation. Some people it's about not taking medication, living freely. So we establish those goals up front and then work towards achieving those goals as we go through the program.
And so as you are, obviously uh, interviewing and
Mhm.
the client potential clients interviewing you regarding it being a good fit based upon what their goals are and what you can bring to them, and then you do the screening test, the different based upon what symptoms they're describing to you, and probably also observation of what you're
Mhm.
observing as well. Are with the second one, with the screening test, is that something that can be billed to insurance? Is that all out of pocket? Yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, I love when we can work with doctors. So a lot of times, if there's a blood chemistry that's pretty recent, or if we can work with a doctor to get a thyroid screening done, I will absolutely work with clients to get their doctors to run it through insurance. But unfortunately, we're considered alternative medicine, which I think is crazy. I think we should be the primary, and alternatives should be surgeries and chemicals. But that's just not the way we're set up today. So it is out of pocket, but I work with clients on payment plans, and this is an investment in their health. So, and the other thing is, what I find is my clients have this ripple effect. So let's say I treat the mother, who has worked, she's got kids just out of the house, and she's starting to find some symptoms, and she's got some time to spend on herself these days, but she's not sure where to turn. So she comes to me, we put together a protocol. There's this ripple effect that happens, right? Because she is now educated on how to fuel her body and how to take care of her body. And that helps teach her kids and her husband and her parents. And there's this ripple effect that the more she knows, the more she can empower other people. So it's an investment in her, but I find that, it touches a lot more lives than just my client. They tend to rub off a little bit on their friends and family, which is great.
And so, I'm gonna pose this question to you, just
Sure.
just because that just kind of gave me an idea, and without sharing any names, because I know there's the confidentiality aspect of it. But if you think of one of those stories of clients that you worked with that kind of like bubbles up to the top of the transformation that they made, and you got to
Mhm.
be part of that,
Mhm.
what comes to mind?
I just get chills because I've got clients that you become almost family with these people. You learn about their challenges, their struggles, you help coach them through the tough times. But I think, a lot of my clients, and one in particular, came to me with very serious blood sugar issues. And we're talking like in the 300s. We don't exactly know because we weren't measuring at that point in time, but very, very high blood sugar, and now within range. And you look at this person, the before and after, and you can see it. The inflammation in her face is gone. She's lost weight. She's got energy. She just feels so much better. And it's, what we learned in the beginning about fueling her body, what I was teaching her, was, hard at first because it was a big adjustment, and she just absorbed it like a sponge. She was a perfect client, was like, I'm fixing this issue because it's causing issues in my eyes. I know what diabetes can do for me, and I don't want any of that. So I'm willing to be disciplined in order to not have to deal with that stuff. And the transformation she's made in 6 months, amazing. Looks like a completely different person, feels like a completely different person. So yeah, incredible.
Well, I think that's a great story, because if we think about that, and at first, when you start a 6-month journey, it
Mhm.
seems like it's like forever. But if we think of it from an aspect of, 6 months ago, that was the beginning of November, end of October.
Mhm.
That doesn't seem that long ago. And
No, and something like diabetes, I mean, before you're even diagnosed with diabetes, it is building up for at least 14 years, they say. So let's talk about that. A decade and a half before you're even diagnosed. She was never technically diagnosed, so we don't know when that was, but let's say this was at least a decade and a half problem. So to undo that in 6 months' time is a big deal. Yeah,
Well, and I can just imagine not only appearance-wise, everything from, her skin health to just, just appearance from, how her body looks, but then also energy-wise and probably
mhm,
sleep-wise. Um,
yes,
yeah, and again, even though 6 months is a long time when you're first starting that journey, in the big scope of things, 6 months goes by pretty quickly, and to think that last summer, or the summer before she started that journey, she was maybe struggling in a lot of different ways with symptoms where she could go into a summer and feel, like
amazing.
you lived the summer. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And know how to eat, be confident in, I know I can go to a barbecue with my family. I know how to select food. I know what's going to be healthy for me, and I don't have to worry about it any longer. So yeah, yeah, she's made amazing transformation. I'm really, really proud of her.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Um, Once again, if someone wanted to get a hold of you, Abby, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah. It's takechargeholistichealth.com.
Perfect. Well, Abby, again, I thank you for being here and your energy and your passion, obviously, for doing this. I'm not surprised you did well in sales, earlier in your career, and now that you've taken those same gifts and moved it toward helping people actually be able to have control in their life. And
Yes.
so,
Thanks for having me, Kevin. I really appreciate it. I always have fun talking with you. So
yeah.
thank you.
Well, thank you. If anyone has had an opportunity to be inspired or intrigued or interested, I would highly encourage you to take that prompting to either pass Abby's information along to someone that you were thinking about, or maybe you're thinking about you, and reach out to Abby and just see what she may have to offer and how you can also transform your life. As always, thank you for being here, and I look forward to being with you next week.